West Coast Eagles fans with long memories will remember the sprinkler incident at the Western Oval. I think it was in the late 80s, maybe the early 90s, when their team went over to play Footscray. Footscray turned one of the most hostile grounds in Victoria into an even worse mud pit by running the sprinklers for days to make sure it didn't suit a WA style of football. The Victorians even turned the sprinklers on during a state game once, I remember, at Waverley Oval, just to put off the WA players. Kevin Sheedy, of course, used to tie down the windsocks at Windy Hill, so visiting WA sides couldn't get an idea before the game about local conditions. Well, it appears the Victorians are at it again. This time they've got the Fremantle Dockers in their sights. It looks like the AFL, which really is never much different from the old VFL. It just likes the money it gets from football in the other states. It looks like the AFL is going to force Fremantle down to the Cattery if the Dockers line up against Geelong in the first round of the finals in just over a week's time, which appears pretty certain. Apart from conferring a significant benefit on Geelong, which always plays its home finals in Melbourne, it means thousands of Fremantle fans who will travel to Melbourne for the game will then have to make their way an extra 75 kilometres south to Simmonds Stadiums. Now, this possibility's been around for a while. In fact, Goss talked about it on this program on Monday. But it's now shaping up as a reality. And AFL boss Andrew Demetrio was asked about it on Melbourne radio this morning.
Just come about because we've got a very unique situation in the first week of the finals. It is possible and most likely that you have Hawthorn, Richmond and Collingwood hosting home finals, and I don't think anyone would argue that they should host those at the MCG. Geelong Football Club finished second, and they've earned the right, we believe, to host either the MCG or Etihad. But the issue with Etihad is that we believe they would probably attract somewhere between 32 to 33,000 people. I know the argument that says last year they got 43,000 at the MCG, but that was also a series ticket game. There were 5,000, or I think about 10,000 MCC members went to that game. So, given that and given the new capacity at Simmonds Stadium, I mean, finishing second does, earn you the right to have an advantage, and we are seriously contemplating as a one-off in this situation. I mean, if they were playing a Victorian team or the Sydney Swans, you'd have to play it at a larger ground capacity. But it's certainly a real possibility, but we won't know yet until we see how the dominoes fall over the weekend.
Geelong hasn't hosted a final since 1897 at Corio Oval.
Well, it's sort of romantic.
Yeah, it would be for a region that is having a tough time. It would be a fillip for a community. Does that play any role?
Look, it does. I mean, having spoken to Brian Cook yesterday, I've got to stress that the Geelong Football Club did not ask for this. They certainly haven't requested it. I think their expectation all along has been that they'll be playing at the MCG or that stadium at Docklands. We went to them, and we've also asked about the economic impact. And the economic impact would be in excess of $5 million plus. I don't think Geelong will have seen anything like this for a long, long time. And if that's a good thing for the community, I can imagine lots of cars speeding down the Bellarine Peninsula, Jared taking it all in, and it would be fantastic. I mean, if it is to be played there, I'll be looking forward to going there just to see what atmosphere and what impact it has on the town.
You get the chopper down, will you?
No.
Fremantle publicly arced up, which was unusual given that they're not locked into that game yet and they are the lower team, but they seem to feel that they definitely have rights here. Do they have rights?
No, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure about all the hullabaloo that's going on. I think that's all a bit of positioning and tactics. But I mean, I think if Fremantle had finished second, there wouldn't be any issue or anyone complaining about them playing at Subiaco. I mean, they've earned that right, and that's where they play all their home games. So I'm not quite sure. Look, to be honest, I haven't heard anybody object to this game being played at Simmonds Stadium other than Fremantle, who have got a vested interest in the game. But that's their prerogative. But at the end of the day, it's the AFL decision. It's an AFL game. We would take over the stadium. Have to make it very clear that if that was the case, we'd go through the ticketing process with Geelong. We wouldn't be able to guarantee members get their seats they normally sit in. There are issues around all that. But, look, it's a real possibility.
So, as we sit here now, if it is Geelong and Fremantle, from all that you've said, it seems more likely than less likely that
would be a fair comment.
So, that was Andrew Demetrio, the head of the AFL, on Melbourne Radio this morning. Dockers President Steve Harris joins me now. Morning, Steve.
Good morning, Paul.
Andrew Demetriou seems to be sort of romantic for you to go to Geelong for your first final. Are you feeling all warm and fuzzy about it?
Oh, well, warm and fuzzy. A thought bubble, the first time in 115 years that they've done it. Yeah, wonderful.
That was so Victorian-centric, that view there. You know, that, because Geelong's doing it tough, what a great thing it would be, and no one is going to object. Oh, of course, other than the Dockers who have got a conflict of interest.
Well, Paul, it's not just the Dockers. It's our supporters, our fans, our members who want to see the game. And you've got a world-class stadium at Etihad that's sitting there in central Melbourne, half an hour from the airport, with all the corporate facilities, with fantastic player coaching facilities sitting there. And we just can't see why you would want to take the game down to Geelong when it hasn't been done for 115 years.
Is Simmonds Stadium suitable for an AFL final?
It's a good quality stadium. They've certainly refurbished it, but it's not of the quality of the MCG, and it's not of the quality of Etihad.
I'm told the change rooms are awful.
Well, I wouldn't say that about another club's facility, but it's not up to the standards of the two central Melbourne grounds. The coach's box for the opposing side is on the other side to the bench, so it's more for us about the access and the ability of our supporters to enjoy the game in a really good quality environment. And I genuinely believe, having pulled sort of close to 45,000 supporters for the last two times we have played finals against Geelong in the last 5 years, why would we go to a 32,500 seat stadium an hour and a half out of Melbourne?
Yeah, surely over a weekend of finals, with four of them in Melbourne, between two stadiums, the MCG and Etihad, you'd be able to work out how to run it in Melbourne.
Etihad is available. Etihad's sitting there ready to be used.
Surely it must penalise Dockers fans if they want to go to Melbourne for this game. Getting to Geelong is a completely different matter for them.
Paul, if you go on the internet now and look, flights from from Perth to Melbourne on the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday prior to that weekend, chock-a-block. There's very few seats left. So I would assume we're going to have several thousand Dockers supporters over there for the game. They've probably made hotel bookings in the centre of Melbourne. They're probably looking forward to spending their money at restaurants and bars in the centre of Melbourne, and they're looking forward to catching the tram or walking to the game. And I don't know what's going to happen. It's great that someone's done an economic forecast at $5 million benefit for the community of Geelong. Great for Geelong. What about the Fremantle supporters who want to be part of the game?
How many Dockers supporters are you expecting would want to go to Melbourne for that game?
I don't know. We have no way of accurately measuring it, but you would expect that the last final we had against Geelong at the MCG last year, I thought we had 5,000 or 6,000 at least in the crowd, at least.
I mean, I love the way he said, if it was Sydney, then we'd have to think about Etihad, but not for Fremantle.
Yeah. So it's a bit incredible. The decision hasn't been made yet, but you'd have to think what we're going through is a bit of a process of softening up through the media, so it's not a great surprise tomorrow. Yeah,
well, it's hardening up over here. I can tell you the sort of response that we're getting. Do you think that hearing this, that Dockers, a significant number of Dockers supporters will now say, we're not going to go because we just don't want to haul ourselves down to Geelong?
Oh, look, I think they'll wait and see what happens. The big concern for me is we've had a really interesting year in the AFL. One of the great things about the AFL is access to the games and access to finals. Finals football is supposed to be the best football around. And, you could be looking at a situation where 10, 12, 13,000 people or more can't get into the game, can't even get a ticket even if they're in Melbourne, because we're playing at a ground with a significantly lower capacity.
Yep.
And then what happens if it rains? Etihad's sitting there with a roof. It is Melbourne we're talking about. Let's say it rains 50-50 chance. What happens if it rains?
Yeah, and we all know the weather in Geelong is significantly different. It does confer a significant advantage on them playing down there.
Yeah. Well, we're not too concerned. We genuinely live by the motto, any team, any time, anywhere. We're not concerned about the on-field aspect. It just seems crazy for our supporters and our members. And that's what the most bizarre thing about this is.
All right, good to talk to you, Steve. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Steve Harris, Dockers president.